Thanks for joining us for our weekly Wednesday devotion time. We've done a few so far this year, and we want to invite you to continue with us on a weekly basis on Wednesdays. And if you would like to see more, or if you've missed some of our other devotions in the past, you can click on our website, northalbany.org, find the Fight for Faith banner, and you'll find over 200 of the other topics that we've walked through in devotion time. Jesus once said, "A servant is not greater than his master." He also said that no pupil is greater than his teacher. But he adds to that, a student, when they are fully trained, will be like their teacher. That's interesting. For the past couple weeks, I have taken on the role of being our youngest teacher electronically, but it's interesting because we sit down on a daily basis and go through the subjects like math and science and English and history. But it is a challenge for me to be the person who is the most learned one, the teacher, right, of these subjects, that the role I have given to the professionals is now my role. It's kind of a daunting proposition. But perhaps you're home and you find yourself in that role during this pandemic season. It's been thrust upon you, and you had to figure out all these new platforms, and you may have several kids that you are dealing with at different levels, and you're teaching them. It's pretty hard. Most of us wouldn't have thought we'd be in this position. But how does this look when we are leading or discipling others? How does that reflect on what we're talking about today? How can we show them the way, if you will, when we stumble and we fall and we're not righteous, we are inept, like I am as a teacher to my youngest? What does that look like? Well, I think we find this example in Jesus. In John 13, before he uttered those verses that I shared earlier, he said to his followers, he invited him, those 12 guys, his servants, his disciples, that he was going to show them the full extension of his love. Remember this in John 13, he would drop to his knees, he would take off his outer garments, and he would invite them to bring them their rotten, dirty, stinking feet. And this was going to be the full extension of his love as master, as teacher to these students. Imagine that. Imagine the horror, really. I think of Peter saying, "You can't do this, Jesus. You're the master, you're the Lord, and yet you're doing this to me? What gives?" I think culturally, they knew that that's not when you attain being the master, everybody else does your bidding. Now, wait a minute, Jesus, what's the deal with you lowering yourself? Not sure about this. Well, I think Jesus says, even I am not above my master who is God in heaven. Interesting. So guys, catch this. This is about humility, and then go and do likewise. Interesting. The master shows humility. No excuses now for the leaders, because even my master is doing these things. Okay. Well, folks, for us to show those around us that we have a perfect model, it's not really about us, it's about him. Well, that takes the pressure off a lot. Thinking about this whole idea of teacher-pupil and teacher-student and all those kind of things. I think our desire as we teach and mentor our children, or in a church sense, those disciples that we have that are following us, is that they'll catch some concept, some looks of righteousness by what we're doing, what we're saying, the decisions we're making, right? That's our hope. And the same kind of thing with teacher-pupil, is that they will pick up some concepts that they can use. And maybe they'll learn enough, and they'll study enough on their own, and have discipline, and they'll have habits that they can attain to be a teacher too. That'd be an awesome thing. Well, one of the things that we have talked about Davey and I, and studied is ancient history. I love history, and it's been kind of fun to kind of review some of those things and learn a lot. We're studying the earliest civilizations of mankind, the Sumerians back in the day, and the Egyptians, and the people group of the Indus Valley. And currently we're in China, and the Chinese people. And in their development, much like those other people groups, they were influenced by a lot of things. But the Chinese people in particular was interesting because they were able to be a cohesive people without a lot of outside influence. Very interesting. They had the Gobi Desert in the north that would keep invaders out, and they had the ocean on their eastern seaboard, and they had the giant Himalayan mountains on the southern border. So they were able to develop on their own without a lot of outside influence. And one of the things that they struggled with was internal states warring against each other. So they had a hard time having a central government, which is really what they have now. But the idea of how to live never really came up until really their second long dynasty period. And a guy named Confucius came along, and we know him, Confucianism. But it's interesting to see this philosopher and what he taught. And his ideas really didn't take shape till he was gone. But he talked about relationships and how important it was to spend time and respect those relationships, a parent to a child, a brother to a brother, a pupil to a teacher. So I think that's very interesting. He was talked about the golden rule. But he also said this, which really resonated with me. And he spent hours of time teaching and talking to his so-called disciples, if you will, his subjects. And he said, I want to teach you one corner of a particular idea or a subject. And it's up to you as the student or the pupil to figure out the other three corners. But isn't that kind of what we're looking at as being a teacher or being a leader, a discipler of Jesus? We want to discover more. God, help us as you are the model of our lives. You can teach us maybe one corner. Maybe we're really good and we get half of it or 3/4 of it. But we've got to be in prayer. We've got to look at his word to get the full scope of what it is to be a follower of Christ. So, church, let's live out our righteousness as humble servants. But we've got to work with our ineptness and look at the Master through his word and the disciplined prayer to be able to come even close to discovering the fullness of our faith when it comes to the Master and his teachings. Thanks, folks, for listening. God bless you, and have a great week.